Well, welcome everyone. Christopher, you want to take it away?
Sure, I will kick us off. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Christopher Kaufman Ilstrup, and I'm the executive director at Vermont Humanities. We are about 40 folks in the room today. So rather than go around the room and do introductions, I'm going to ask if folks can please put your name, and if you're representing an organization, put that into the chat along with the town that you're located in, so that we can see who is in the room. Knowing that not everybody's Zoom ID is their actual ID. Susan, I also want to point out to folks that the meeting is being recorded. And Susan, I'm wondering if you can say what will happen with the recording.
Say that. Thanks, Christopher. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Evans-McClure, the Executive Director of Vermont Arts Council. Welcome to the 2025 Vermont Creative Sector Legislative Briefing. We are recording this, and the recording is going to go on our website afterwards. Does that cover it, Christopher? Was that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
that covers it. I just want to make sure that people are aware. So with questions and comments, those will be publicly available after the meeting for other people to view. Here we are. We're about 3 weeks out from the start of the Vermont legislative session. And of course, also a little over a month away from a new administration in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of changes happening in both the Vermont State Legislature as well as in DC. Some of those changes may be anxiety provoking for some people. But as Susan and I talk at the councils with our board members, our biggest message to you is keep at it, work on your mission, and keep doing the good work that you're doing. We will talk a little bit more about some of the specifics of what we're looking at in the legislature. We can also answer some questions about what we know so far about changes that might be coming at NEA and NEH, as well as IMLS, of course, the Smithsonian and the other federal cultural agencies, if you have questions about those. But the primary focus here is to build up that sense of optimism. We have been in challenging places before. We will be in challenging places again, but arts and artists and humanists are important members of the community, and we want you to keep doing what you're doing. So that's my brief introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to do an update on federal updates on the NEA side. And then I will talk a little bit about federal updates on the NEH side. Then our friend Patty Komline, who works with us in the State House, will talk a little bit about what's coming up in the upcoming legislative session. So Susan, over to you.
Christopher. As Christopher mentioned, yes, there are going to be some federal changes. So we're going to share what we know this morning, and then we'll just keep knowing what we know as we move forward. One of the things that I have been thinking about a lot is our role as an arts and culture sector in sustaining people through change and helping our communities understand why we need to keep communicating and creating and being together and making art and understanding our past. That feels more important now than I think it ever has before. I think it's also important to say that we don't know much about what's coming, but we know that there will be change. And being in moments where you know change is going to happen, but you don't know what the change is going to be, can be unsettling. I like to tell myself a phrase that I learned once called sequential worrying. You should be prepared for the future, but really you can only worry about things in the sequence that you know they're actually going to happen. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but when we do know, we will make decisions and react to that as we go. As a sector, especially our sector here in Vermont, we got through COVID together, and we're going to get through whatever we need to get through together as well. The instinct in times of stress, I think, is really to retreat to our corners, but that's not how we're going to thrive. We have to stick together as a sector, and I know that all of us are poised to do that. Before I get into some federal updates, I'm going to take just a break to mention that we do have a captioner today. This event is being live captioned by White Coat Captioning, and you can access the captions in the bottom ribbon of the Zoom screen. And if anyone has questions about that or challenges, you can direct message Deirdre Connolly, and she can put you in touch with the right person on how to get that set up. Okay, so back to federal updates. They're going to be minimal because we don't know what's happening. The big one that people are tracking at the federal level right now is when the FY25 budget is going to happen. Currently, the federal government is on a continuing resolution, which means that the Congress has decided to keep the government running, but not to actually have a budget for the fiscal year that we're currently in yet. There was some discussion about if the current Congress would pass the budget now. That's as we get longer into December, that's looking more and more unlikely. But hey, we don't know. But that might mean that the next Congress passes the budget, which may or may not mean changes for federal funding to federal agencies like National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, Institute Museum and Library Services, Library of Congress, Smithsonian, all of them. So we'll just kind of keep tracking that. And again, as we know those changes, we'll make decisions around them. Any changes that do happen at the federal level are slow. Our federal government is actually designed to be slow, which at times can be maddening, and at times is a pretty good system, because big swings are not what we ever want in terms of stability. So if there are changes, we'll know about them ahead of time. We'll know what they're going to be, positive or negative. We'll know, we'll have some time to prepare, and we can do that. Right now, we just don't know what that is. Other issues that we're kind of tracking of federal level issues are conversations around censorship and free speech for artists and creatives. We know that a lot of the work that we all do across the state and across the country and internationally has at times felt controversial in ways that it maybe never has before. Again, our role as arts organizations is to not censor ourselves quickly. It's to actually just kind of see what happens from the federal level and then make decisions that are right for you, of course, leaning on our American values of free speech and the fact that we do support artists, creatives, humanists to say the things that they are want to say in the world, because that makes us all stronger. We're also looking at kind of ongoing perceptions and realities of elitism in our fields and what that means to people across the country and in Vermont. That as we've been following these national conversations about who is feeling left out of our national politics, local politics, that there is a real opportunity for the arts and culture sector to help people connect with the really valuable work that we all do at a really good grassroots community level. On a much more technical level, we're also following potential upcoming challenges around visas and immigration issues for international artists and scholars, especially those that are visiting Vermont. We have great support in our federal delegation. Representative Balance office, Senator Welch's office, Senator Sanders' office, and helping to negotiate any challenges that may or may not come up around that. And again, you'll hear us say this a lot today, like they may or may not come up. We don't know, but we're prepared when we are prepared when they do, and we're prepared to communicate that to all of you and work together so that we can all continue to do the really great work that you do around our state. So I'm going to pass it back to Christopher. If you want to talk about the National Endowment for the Humanities and anything you know about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. The good news, of course, is that there has been a lot of work done on the federal budget for this current fiscal year already. And the current continuing resolution funds the two endowments at level funding of what they were funded at FY24, which is actually quite an increase from where they were 2 years before that, thanks to Senator Leahy and others in Congress who were able to make a pretty big jump in funding for the endowments a couple years ago. So that's good news. The good news also on the budget work that's been done so far is that it's largely maintaining that level of funding for the state arts agencies and for the state humanities councils. So that is a positive. As Susan said, things are slow in Washington. If we are lucky enough to get an omnibus budget bill passed before December 20th, I think it will largely be at that higher funding level. If they kick it into March, it will, of course, be a new Congress and they'll have an opportunity to start over. But a lot of the staff will largely be the same in the federal offices working on appropriations. So we'll see. I think, again, as Susan said, it's really important to not panic until we need to panic. I had a conversation with one of our dear friends and creatives, Catherine Patterson, last week, where she reminded me that we should all keep our cool and not panic until the very last minute. And she said, if you find yourself getting to the very last minute and starting to panic, take a breath, pause, ask yourself, is it really the last minute? Or do you really just need to keep on organizing? So I think that is an important message from Catherine, who, of course, has been in the middle of a lot of changes in the federal environment for arts and culture for a lot of years, right? Her books are among those that are most frequently banned. And she's been following this since the 1960s. So I think it's important to listen to her. That just keep on going is what we should be doing. Of course, the incoming administration has a lot of priorities, including things you've been reading about in the news every day that are a challenge for Vermont and for the nation, including challenges around potential large-scale deportation, border security issues, trying to discontinue federal DEI policies, and so on. But I think there's also some things that could potentially benefit arts and culture. And I know that might be a little controversial to say, but there might be the possibility that there might be a higher priority placed on things like arts and culture in rural communities like Vermont. There might also be more of an interest in supporting arts and culture programming for veterans and military families. Those are all things that I think most of us can get behind and support. So coming up, as Susan said, there's a slight possibility we'll have a budget before the end of the current Congress. Most likely we're looking into March, and we'll just keep moving forward as we go with that. There will be a change, of course, in the leadership of NEH and NEA. Typically, when a new administration comes in, the political appointees step down. We expect that to happen here as well. And we don't know who will get the most recent change from the previous Trump administration to the Biden administration took them a year and a half to put new chairs in charge of the endowments. So we might be looking at quite a long time before we really have new political appointees at the endowments. On the other hand, it might not. We just don't know. We'll keep monitoring it. We have lobbyists for both Americans for the Arts, as well as the Federation of State Humanities Council, working in Congress and working with members of the transition team all along to make sure that our interests are known. And we'll keep you posted as much as we can. I should have mentioned up front that we've been talking a lot, and I know you probably have questions. I am going to pass it over to Patty, and she is going to talk about the local situation, but we've left a good long time at the end to have a conversation and to answer questions. So we're happy to do that at the end. We won't just lecture at you. Patty, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Deirdre is going to share a slide deck that we prepared to talk about post-election in Vermont. Here we come. Okay, you can go to the next slide. I don't know if you want to. There we go. So thank you. So the key highlights, I'm sure everybody knows about all of this by now, so we'll just do a refresher. Of course, Phil Scott easily won. He is now, he won by the biggest margin, I think, historically, and he's also the most popular governor in the nation. So he's going to have a mandate. We'll talk about that later. But interesting, John Rogers. So John Rogers, who was a Democrat, I would say moderate, fiscally moderate Democrat, decided to actually forgot to file for his Senate seat. So he missed out there a few years ago. So then he decided to switch over and become a Republican. And Phil Scott worked very hard campaigning with him. It turns out Phil Scott had long coattails, something that even Jim Douglas, who was very popular, did not have. But John Rogers won. It was a narrow defeat, but that's very very interesting. That's got a lot of people's attention, the fact that John Rogers could pull off this win. Now, having said that, neither of them got 50% of the vote, which means in the beginning of the session, there will be a vote of the legislature to confirm one or the other. David Zuckerman says he is not campaigning for the legislators to vote for him, but he's letting them know that's an option. I think he has underestimated the frustration, a lot of Democrats, that Dave always runs as a Democrat, and then as soon as he gets in, he says he's a progressive. So no one thinks that Dave has much of a chance of pulling off a win, because he did not win the popular vote there. So the Democrats lost the supermajority in both the House and the Senate, which of course is big, and I'm sure you've read about that. And it has caused them to do a lot of reflection on what they've been working on and what their priorities may need to be. And we'll talk more about that in the coming slides. Okay, the next slide, please. So again, I said Phil Scott was 71% of the vote. It's hard to get a very, not that I don't think Esther was credible, but it's hard to get a very strong candidate to run against somebody so popular. That's why you usually don't have strong Republicans running for Congress for the same reason, because Republicans know they don't stand a chance there. The same thing, kind of, people know it's very hard to come against Phil Scott. Other statewide races, of course, Charity Clark, Mike Pichek, Sarah Copeland-Hansis, and Doug Hoffer all won handily. However, they didn't win with as great in numbers as they have in the past, which is also interesting. It's showing a little bit of a shift here in Vermont. And I think a lot of that, we say nationally, I've been saying, and now I've heard other people say, you know, it's the price of eggs nationally. And I think here it was the price of your property tax bill and the concerns about heating fuel tax that has caused some loss of support for the Democrats. Next slide, please. So Phil Scott is the first time he ever really campaigned for others. I can tell you, I ran his lieutenant governor campaigns years ago, and he wasn't excited about endorsing a candidate. So for him to come out this strongly and actively campaign with candidates is something very anathema to him, but it proved to be very successful. And he used the property tax increases and the clean heat standard as major talking points. Democrats kind of lost the PR battle in this, because Phil was talking about, you know, property taxes going up an average of 14%. I think in one town, somebody said it was 40% property tax increase. Now, I'm not sure the governor came out strong with anything to address this towards the end of the session, other than his veto. So there wasn't a lot for people to push back on even and criticize. Well, yes, this is what the property tax increase is, but the governor really didn't come up with an alternative. That pushback was kind of lost in the PR battle. And he advocated for more balance, and and I think that the increased taxes are what caused this red wave or red surge to occur. Next slide, please. So we put in this visual. This is the Senate as it looks now, with the Democrats and Republicans, and it's just an interesting visual to see the gains that are going to be made in the Senate, particularly. I mean, this is a huge jump of Republicans. The lieutenant governor is a tie-breaking vote. So by all accounts, not only does the governor have a veto-proof or veto-sustaining majority here, but it's possible that with a couple Democrats going towards Republicans on some bills, they would even win without, you know, the governor's positions and the Republicans' positions would prevail even on regular floor votes. Chris Bray was a surprise loss. Mark McDonald both. They've been there, especially Mark has been there a long time. And he always has a race, but this was the first time that he lost in quite a while. I say that because he lost once after, I think, not marriage, but a civil union vote, but he quickly came back. So, and interestingly, no incumbent Republican in the House or Senate running lost their seat. I thought that was pretty notable. Okay, the next slide, please. So there's the gains in the House, not as significant as the Senate, but 19 seats is a lot of seats to get. And there was 2 committee chairs, Diane Lamphere, who's a moderate Democrat, who is the chair of appropriations. People are very sad about that all across the board. She's very she was a really important person in the building. And yeah, so there's your numbers there. Republicans picked up 19. Democrats were down 18. One's an independent. Okay, the next slide, please. So party leadership. So there's talk about this challenge. Laura Sibilia is an independent in the House. She is running for Speaker. That matters to a lot of people. They may not be paying attention on the outside, but the chairs of committees, the makeup of committees is in play there. It was interesting to be in the State House yesterday. They had a legislative update day. She's hired a former legislator to lobby for her. So this woman was speaking to a lot of people. I do know that the Republicans will make a decision and they will band together and vote for one, whether it be Jill Krowinski, the incumbent speaker, or Laura remains to be seen, but Laura is working hard for that position. It's tricky for us because we think we know kind of what the makeup of committees is going to be. If Laura is elected, it will change up everything. And that changes the dynamic and how we work on your behalf. It's a lot of conversations. Election results here will fuel internal debates. You see that. Yes, about what are the priorities? What are the Democratic priorities now, given these losses? And I think are being forced to really consider the public's concerns, especially regarding taxes. And committees will change up a lot. We're hearing a lot of rumors. And again, that's for us to have to be concerned about so that we can be effective for all of you. So, okay, next slide, please. So I don't expect you to look at this closely, but these are the changes in the committees, who is lost. And it's significant because if you just look down to the bottom right here, the Ways and Means, who lost the most people, that is the committee that is going to be taking on education funding changes. And they lost a lot of people, a lot of seasoned people there. Scott Beck went to the Senate. Catherine Sins ran for the Senate and lost. Chris Matos also went to the Senate. And I think we had, and the others lost. One retired and two others lost their races. So this is a big deal for Ways and Means because you have to have experienced people in there. These have got to be the sharpest people to be taking on the property tax issue. Next slide, please. And again, the same, if you look in the top right, you see Senate Finance. Again, they lost 4 of their committee members. Or I'm sorry, 3 committee members. And that is important as well, because this education finance will be discussed here. It's possible that they will also be taking it on in the education committee. But these were strong people with a lot of experience that are no longer on Senate Finance. So things will definitely look different there. Next slide, please. So the governor is now empowered since the body has lost their supermajorities. I will say that from my perspective, the governor doesn't come on strong with initiatives. He kind of sits back and waits for the House and Senate to come up with ideas and then raise concerns. He is really going to have to come up with something. He's going to have to be taking a lead. And the Republicans stand ready to back him up on that, but they're not the ones with all of these new members that'll be able to really come up with the new policies that should be considered as alternatives to what's going on now. So there's going to be more need for bipartisan work, and the governor is going to have to deliver there. Next slide, please. So legislative priorities, it's interesting. You always go with 3, right? So 3-legged stool, the balance of 3. And it was interesting because, you know, Ed Fund obviously is the top of everybody's mind, and housing. And then I struggled with the 3rd, and I talked to some people yesterday, like, what are you thinking? And mental health and addiction came up. But when I was looking at Digger this morning and they were reporting, and it really was just the 2, the ed funding and the housing, that are really the focus for everybody. Now, with regard to the ed fund, there are conversations amongst the status quo people who say, well, we need to change how you pay for it. And then there are other people that say, yes, and we need to talk about cost containment. We can't keep doing things like we've been doing. We can't just change it up. We have to try and constrain spending. Word went out that the average, there's a December 1st letter that the tax department puts out, and that's the first go of, this is what it looks like we have to increase the ed fund by, the taxes by, and it was 5.9%, which is lower than people expected. Last year, of course, remember it was, well, the average, it ended up being 14.9%. And people are, the Democrats are standing with the Republicans and saying that 5.9 isn't a win. We still absolutely need to address this and do something bold. So that's where things sit with all of them. I'm looking, I have some notes over here to make sure I've got everything covered. Hold on one second. Yes, so while these changes are big and a lot more Republicans are in there, I will say that Republicans have been very supportive of the arts. They do understand that the creative economy is an important economic driver. And we have had very good relationships and very good support. Russ Engels, actually, the Art and State Buildings, we worked with him. He was very supportive of that, and he's a Republican chair there. We do have great supporters in the House and Senate, standouts. Rebecca Holcomb in the House. Sadly, Stephanie Jerome was great for us. She was the vice chair of Commerce and Economic Development. She lost her race. That's another one we're very sad about. She was great, but we do have Rebecca. And in the Senate, Allison Clarkson has been a very, very great friend and a pleasure to work with on the arts, on supporting the arts. There's a report in closing. There is a report that went out. Nick Chernick, who's very well respected by the Democrats, did a postmortem of what he saw as why this big win by the Republicans in the state. If anybody's interested in that, Susan, I'll send you that report. And there were some really interesting takeaways. Standout amongst them was, we have a Republican governor that he gets half of his support from Democrats. And the Democrats really went after him. And they didn't have a strong voice running against him. So it was just the House and Senate people going against him. And so you were going against him to people who you're hoping you're going to vote for you, but we're voting for him. And that was kind of a dynamic that played a factor, people believe. So it was a very interesting, it's a 30+ page report, but if anybody's interested in that, I can get that to them. And I think I've got everything covered.
Thank you so much, Patty. So there's a lot going on federally. There's a lot going on in Vermont, lots of change. And what we're going to talk about today is how the Vermont Creative Network is going to continue to push forward our policies and policy priorities that are really going to advance the entire creative sector. As Patty mentioned, we do have very strong support, tripartisan support for the arts, because the arts and culture and the creative sector are for everyone. We know that the creative economy is an incredibly important part of Vermont's economy. In fact, we're the third largest economic sector of our state. And not only is investing in the creative economy good for the numbers and the dollars and the people, it's also good for our relationships and our communities and the way we interact as a society. So now Deirdre's going to show another presentation, and we're going to go through some of our priorities that we'll be working to advance in the legislature this season on behalf of all of you. Every year we identify a few key advocacy goals that really are the heart of what holds our work together in the legislature. The first is continuing to position the creative sector as part of the solution to existing significant issues. We know that our sector needs to be supported on its own. We also know that for these large issues that Vermont is facing, housing, healthcare, community cohesion, those are issues at which the creative sector can have an incredibly important role and is already working in communities across the state to advance those issues and make them better for everyone. So we'll be continuing to tell that story and coming to many of you to ask you to participate in telling that story in the legislature this year. Second for us this year is on focus on orienting new legislators. As Patty mentioned, there has been some turnover, there'll be some new folks. So a lot of our role is also being with them and letting them know about the important role that the creative sector plays and making some new creative sector fans. A lot of people have experiences with the creative sector that you might not even think about, right? Your kids are probably in some sort of arts related program at their school. You've been to visit a museum, you go to a library in your community. Those are all part of the creative sector. And a lot of our work will be reminding people about who we are and what we do and our importance. Can you go to the next slide, please? So when it comes to the things that we talk about with people, we are always focused on this idea that arts, culture, and creativity are foundational to solving these issues that we're facing as a state. The creative sector works at the intersection of economic development. We're the third largest economic sector in the state. And when we strengthen Vermont's creative economy, we strengthen the overall economy. We're also part of the workforce development. When you invest in creative sector jobs, it keeps workers in Vermont, it attracts workers to Vermont, and it's part of the bigger economic picture for our state. And the creative sector is key to climate and community resilience. We've seen over the past several years the vital role that arts, culture, and creativity play in Vermont's recovery and resilience. And we know, unfortunately, that that is going to be a need in the future and one that our sector is ready to play. Next slide, please. So when it comes to specific legislative priorities that we'll be working to advance in the State House, the first is supporting the Better Places program. Better Places was a partnership program that was run out of the Agency of Commerce starting in the COVID era. And it's a program that funds projects in communities that are about creative placemaking, not just creative placemaking, but usually it's creative placemaking. So we're working to advocate for more state funding for that program. There was some state funding at the end of the last session. The program was, there was no additional funding put into the program, but the program was allowed to continue to exist. So this year we'll be going back and requesting some additional funding for that. It is a partnership funded model. So some of the funding comes from the state, some of the funding is raised by the communities themselves. And the idea of the program is to fund projects that enliven community spaces and really work on community resilience and community development. So that can be arts and culture festivals that are outdoors. It can be building a band shell so that you can have a music performance at your farmer's market. It's really a wide range of projects that have happened all across the state and have been really impactful, and we're excited to continue. We're also going to continue our work on the Film and Creative Media Workforce Development Initiative. Vermont is one of very few states across the country who don't do anything at the state level to support the film and creative media industry. And what we are requesting is really some baseline support that'll help get the industry on its legs. We want an infrastructure for this industry. We know you may have heard of, other states that do major tax breaks like Massachusetts, California, even New York. That's not going to work in Vermont, and it's not what we are looking at. Instead, what we're looking at is requesting funding that would support some infrastructure support, creating a database so that we know who is working in film, what the options are, where the resources are, and we can make it just a little bit easier for people to film their projects here and to develop their creative projects, digital creative projects here too. We also know that when we think about film and the film industry, it's often you think of like big film sets and productions, but actually we're living I feel kind of silly saying we're living in a digital age. Obviously, I'm talking to you all through a computer. But even all of our smallest small businesses in the state need access to digital media services to have successful small businesses. And we need that infrastructure for the creative media industry to exist here in Vermont to serve our very local small businesses too. So we'll be working to request and hopefully advance this project because it'll have a huge impact on the state for actually a very small dollar amount in this very tough budget year. We're also going to be asking for an increase to the Cultural Facilities Grants Program. This program, which is part of the capital bill, is the program that funds cultural facilities improvements to buildings across the state in which culture happens. So those could be theaters, museums, town-owned facilities. It's a wide range of physical spaces. We know that this is one of the very few grant programs across the state that fund actual capital projects. And these projects are often ones that increase accessibility and help with climate mitigation projects. So last year we expanded a new focus on being able to support some climate mitigation and green energy projects as part of the cultural facilities grants. And we have had a huge increase in requests for these. So what we're looking for is additional funding to invest in this program and invest in our communities and their cultural organizations. Because we know that those cultural facilities are the ones that are the heart of our communities, really. And when they go away, or when the roofs leak or when they're not accessible to people, that's a huge loss for the communities. And we want to make sure that everywhere across the state has access to those. Next slide, please. Some upcoming events for you to mark your calendars for. Today is the first of 2 Vermont Creative Network webinars. Today, you're at the first one. You're already doing the things on this list. You're at the first one today on the 5th. On Monday the 9th, we're also going to be hosting a webinar on some regulation changes for creative businesses and nonprofits, as well as some opportunities for creative businesses, nonprofits, and individuals to participate in from the state. We'll be hearing from someone from the Treasurer's Office to talk about the new Vermont Saves retirement program. We'll be hearing from an HR lawyer who's going to talk about some changing federal regulations that are impacting creative businesses as well. So I made that sound dry when I talked about it, but it's going to be really valuable, and we hope you'll attend that too. Coming up on December 18th, Common Good Vermont, a key partner of ours in the Creative Network, is also hosting a webinar, an introduction to nonprofit advocacy. Many of you here today might be working for nonprofits who have nonpartisan missions, and understanding the role that nonprofits can play in advocacy is a very important one, especially in this moment. You can advocate. There are limits to what you can do, and understanding how you can participate is really important. Coming up in February, once we head into the legislative session, February 12th is Creative Sector Day in the State House. So that day is an opportunity for us to highlight for the legislators all of the things that Vermont's creative sector brings to our state. It's also really fun. There's going to be we have an amazing sector because we are performers and artists and musicians and circus artists. And it's just a really great way to highlight the breadth of what the creative sector offers, and also to have a fun day in the State House. In March, there will also be a Youth Art Month in the State House Cafeteria Art Show. And then April 23rd, Common Good Vermont is hosting their Nonprofit Advocacy Day as well. So through our emails, which you are all signed up for because you were on this webinar, you'll get more information about how to participate in all of those days as well. Next slide, please. So in moments like these, I often think about the words of civil rights activist Diane Nash, who has said that everyone has a responsibility to find out what you can do and do more of that. Not everyone has to do everything, but it's important to know what your role is and what important role you can play. Some people are protesters, some people are activists, some people write letters, some people continue to make art and just do their great work. And that is also a form of advocacy. So I wanted to highlight just top 5 ways to be a creative sector advocate in 2025. And the first, and potentially most important, is know who your elected officials are. We're going to put a link, just put a link in the chat to the General Assembly website where you can search to see search by town to see who your elected officials are at the state level. If you haven't, you can also go to your town's website and look up your select board members, and then also go to your school district website and look up your school board members as well. Knowing who those people are is the first step. Vermont has a lot of, well, everywhere, but Vermont has a lot of elected officials, both at the state and local level, who are making decisions that are really impacting all of our communities and the creative sector. Knowing who yours are, where you live, where your organization is based, is very important. The second act is to not only find out who those people are, but get to know them. We have the benefit in the creative sector of hosting things that people come to, performances, programs, music events. And the best thing you can do is call them up and invite them to come. Elected officials are a committed group who want to know what's happening in their for their constituents and in their regions. And they like coming to stuff. So sometimes that can be emailing them and just telling them, hey, we have an exhibit opening. We'd love for you to come. A music performance. It can be just picking up the phone and saying, hi, I'm an artist and I'm your constituent. Do you want to come to my studio? I'd love to host you. So we do encourage all of you to not only know who they are, but invite them to stuff, get to know them. The third thing in your creative sector advocate role this year is to think about your organizational values and your personal values. Really understand values guide the work of your organization or your work as an individual artist or creative. In some ways, this work of organizational values is a form of kind of micro-organizing or micro-advocacy, really getting the people around you all on the same page and moving that work forward together in whatever way that looks like for you is incredibly valuable. And once you define those values, being able to lead from them and use them to make decisions for whatever is coming in the future, we need to know that our decisions are based on the values that we have already defined. So taking some time to do that is very valuable. And then, of course, getting involved. Figuring out the right way to be involved, whatever that means for you or your organization. And one thing I do think is important to talk about is that sometimes just being open about the fact that our roles in the workplace are not the only place we have to solve the challenges that we're facing. So sometimes getting involved outside of work is the right thing to do too. Being able to stop and ask, is this an issue that is an organizational issue? Is this an issue that is something I feel passionately about personally? And how do I, where is the best place for me to fit in there? And then of course, and I will say this till the end of my days, run for office. One of the best things we can do as a creative sector is have creative sector individuals sitting in those rooms, making the decisions as elected officials. We have a great number of creative sector folks in the legislature right now, which is really exciting. There's an artist block in Southern Vermont in the of representatives, which is awesome, and other folks around the state who are stepping up. So there are lots of organizations that support folks to run for office, and having creative sector people in those seats is really important. Here's our next slide, please. All right, just a few more things to note, and I want to save time for questions too. Coming up, we'll put some links in the chat here too. Coming up is the regulation report on Monday, Common Good's Introduction to Nonprofit Advocacy also. And I wanted to mention also the Vermont Visitor Survey. So the Department of Tourism and Marketing is conducting a year-long Vermont Visitor Survey to better understand people who are coming to Vermont. And of course, there's so many links between the tourism sector and the arts and culture sector. And the goal of the study is to gather a better understanding of the characteristics, perceptions, and behavior of Vermont's visitors to support what the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing is doing. So we encourage you to visit that link, get your organization signed up to participate and be part of gathering that data. It's going to make a really big difference at the state level as we are investing state dollars to increase our tourism economy, of which again, arts, culture, and creativity is such an incredibly important part. So I think that's the last slide. Is that right, Deirdre? All right, thank you. We have some 15 minutes-ish to take some questions. I will note that Emma made a very good point that we had the wrong date for Common Good Vermont Nonprofit Legislative Day. It's actually April 22nd. For those of you who are frantically writing it down because you can't wait, it's April 22nd. That would be me. And we hope to see you there for that too. If people have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. You can also just unmute yourself and say your question or your thought or your reaction. We would love to hear it and be able to learn together. I think there's, yes, Senator Clarkson, hi, thanks for coming. Go ahead.
David Mook has a question too. I just want to thank you for doing this, Patty and Christopher and Susan. This was great. I would note, Patty, that I don't think progressives are neutral. For your, it was an interesting choice for our progressives. I guess something that Susan mentioned really came up in our forums, which was really nasty. We had some people running against us who kept trying to make us look elite because Joe Major, the now senator-elect from Windsor District, talked about being on the board of Northern Stage and used the housing issue for Northern Stage. And that kept being referred to in our forums as you elite, candidate, that you would care and focus on anything to do with the arts. And we kept addressing that, but it was really kind of nasty and insidious. And I think you're absolutely right to focus on that, because that is not, I mean, not just, we can't be encouraging that anywhere, obviously. And then I had a second thing, which was, what was the final cultural facilities grants total this year? Does somebody have that? And who's putting in that bill to ask for more?
Yeah, that was $300,000 in the capital bill in the last session, and we have requested $400,000 for us because we're a quasi-state agency. We started that request through the governor's office, and we're waiting to see where the governor's budget lands, and then we will be going through the House and Senate Institutions Committees to reach out to folks and see.
Terrific. And then are you planning on introducing a bill on the workforce development piece? Because there's going to be we're going to be focusing on workforce development a bit in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, just because we will be. So who's doing that bill? And if you don't have anybody, I'm happy to help put it together if you want.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Yes, I will reach out to you about that, Senator Clarkson, because I think that would be.
I look forward.
Thank you. And thanks for being here. We so appreciate your support. I will say I work with colleagues all over the country who do not have it like we do in the creative sector. I have the great pleasure of working with many of our legislators, and I go in with my talking points about the creative sector, and within 30 seconds, they look at me and they tell me why the creative sector is important to them. So that is very different than other parts of the country and really enjoyable. I think next I saw David Mook had a hand up, and then we'll do Annie.
Yes, thank you. I'm a poet and a writer, and I'm run some literary programs at Stone Valley Arts in Poultney, and we've benefited from your grants. Very much appreciate that. But I also teach part-time at Vermont State University, Castleton, and for 19 years. And my concern is the transformation of Vermont State University system, and their optimization report says, and I quote, that the fine arts, creative writing, and literature are not critical occupations in Vermont. And this was a report that was endorsed by the Vermont State College Chancellor, the Board of Trustees, Governor Scott's appointed interim president, Mike Smith, supported it. And, you know, the language in this report that's created from consultants, clearly, I mean, it says that there are no jobs in Vermont for writers and artists. And the Federal Department of Labor says that Vermont ranks number 5 in opportunities for writers and literature. So the efforts of the arts community is being undermined in the secondary education and higher education in Vermont. And they're using these false narratives to cut arts programs and reduce arts programs in higher education. So the fact that we talk about the creative sector and how important it is, how many jobs, and workforce development is the thing that gets people's attention. So that's a very strong, I mean, it's 9.3% of the workforce, you know. So I think that's a strong message that maybe the Vermont State College system, the Board of Trustees, the Chancellor might listen to, and instead of believing that these are not critical occupations. When I read that in that report, I just was so angry. So I thank you for all the work you're doing. And but the legislature, this is another area of higher education that we might have to lobby as well to get the message through. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. Looking at the creative sector in both higher ed and pre-K through 12 education too is something we're really focused on at in our role at the Arts Council, and something we'll be moving forward in the next year is really understanding the role of advocacy in the arts and cultural education, arts and cultural education advocacy and policy area as well. There is a perception, right, where the arts or the humanities are an add-on to whatever a core subject is. I do think that is changing, but it takes a lot of continued work and communications and continuing to share that message over and over again. And I know everyone on this call does that. extensively, and we appreciate you continuing to say that message because it is really vital, as you said, David. Thank you. Christopher, do you want to respond to that too?
Yeah, David, thanks so much for bringing that up. I have had this conversation many times with people at CCV and Vermont State University. They're largely basing their framing on the Vermont critical jobs work that has been done by the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation. And I'll put the link to that into the chat so that people can access that. And they really have a very narrow set of criteria for how they develop that list. And the way that it was explained to me, which is not acceptable, but it is an explanation, is that it's about jobs that young people can get immediately upon completing a program at Vermont State University. And so if you want to be an artist or a writer, typically it takes many years of practice doing other things before you become successful in a narrow definition of what successful might mean for an artist, before you can kind of get there. And what they're talking about in the most critical jobs campaigns are jobs where you can get the degree and then you can get the job and immediately start doing it. So that is things like nursing and plumbing and so on. So I'll put that link into the chat, but I think it is critical for people working in the creative economy to keep hammering on the point that the critical jobs definition is not broad enough to actually encompass most of what Vermonters actually want to do, which of course includes the creative sector. So I'll throw that into the chat for folks. And anytime anybody can offer feedback either to the McClure Foundation or to Vermont State University, Vermont State College System, that they should rethink their criteria or at least rethink their framing, it would be helpful.
Great, thanks, Christopher. And I'm not that McClure, by the way. I just feel like saying it's my last name. Annie, go ahead.
Hi there. I have a comment and a question. One is that I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but a study that came out of Southern Methodist University Data Arts in June named 30 arts vibrant rural counties in the United States, and 3 are in Vermont. And Addison and Lamoille are in the top 30, and Wyndham is number 4. That said, it prompted me to work on an article on just what it takes to be an artist, and just how sustainable is that, but that's another thing. So I just didn't know if everybody was aware of that. It's pretty cool. The second is I want to dig a little bit more at the film thing, because I've interviewed several filmmakers over the last several months, and with all due respect, they say it's great to get a grant for $5,000, but films are like, if it's a budget under 2 million, it's considered a budget film, which is like crazy to me. So I'm just wanted to probe a little bit more. Why no opportunity for tax breaks? Why is that totally off the table?
I think Patty and I can answer that better than maybe anybody here, because we were on Ways and Means when we got rid of it. I think, right? Weren't you, Patty, when we got rid of it? So Patty and I served together. We're in the same class in the legislature long time ago. And we had the pleasure of serving on Ways and Means. My husband was one of the founders of the Vermont Film Commission, and along with Matt Dunn and Bill Stetson and a couple other people. And we had a tax credit for many years, and it underperformed big time. And we cannot compete. Our pockets are not deep enough to compete with New York, Massachusetts, Quebec, Connecticut. I mean, any of the states around us that have sort of a similar topography, Maine, we just don't have the pockets to compete. It was way underused. And so we ended up eliminating it as a tax expenditure, and you would have a very difficult time reviving it. Apprenticeships, other kind of resource lists, whatever else, fine. But I don't think you'll ever see a tax credit again, unless we have a dedicated funding source for it, and we could raise the millions and millions of dollars we'd need.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to put a coda on that. I mean, I just saw Lost Nation brilliant film by Jay Craven, and most of it was filmed on Nantucket. So
Right, correct, because Massachusetts has a very robust tax credit system, which we cannot afford.
got it. Okay.
And what we're requesting, I think it's a great question, Annie, and what we're requesting there, thank you for that, Senator Clarkson. What we're requesting is specifically funding that would support the infrastructure for the industry. So we're looking for having Vermont, so there is a little inside baseball, but there is a national database of film assets. And we would like Vermont to participate in that database. What we're looking at really is for the folks who are thinking about filming in Vermont, we want to, this is a bad metaphor, we want to push them over that cliff. We want to make sure that it's easy for them to work here. They know how they can work here. They have someone to talk to when they have questions. And that's the level of support we're looking for, because we think that's the right level of support for where the film industry is in Vermont right now. That might change in 10 more years, right? But for where we are right now, that's the next step in a sequential process that'll get us to grow that industry in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Lou Mulvaney-Stanek.
Hey, everybody. I'll try to be fast. I know that we don't have a lot of time. David, I'm a Castleton grad, Castleton State. That's how long ago I went to Castleton. So I feel you on all of that. So I'm the station manager for WGDR Plainfield and WGDH Hardwick, Central Vermont Community Radio, former Goddard College station, not a moment too soon, became community owned 3 or 4 years ago. I could regale you all with what's happening on campus, but I will save that for another day and just encourage everybody about 3 things. One, the new buyer of campus, Mike Davidson, has a lot of big, huge ideas, and some of those ideas definitely dip into the creative sector. And so I encourage, especially the Vermont Arts Council and even Christopher, the Humanities, to make some outreach to the folks who are starting to get that dreaming and scheming together, because there's some exciting stuff on there. I mean, there's a bazillion ideas, but I do think there's an opportunity there. That said, the world of community radio in Vermont also is not publicly funded. We're in that same camp with the film industry. And yet we are a huge microphone for the Creative Arts Network, for all of the artists and poets and writers, and just the huge network there. So I just want to remind folks that we're there for you guys, and we're about to double in size. So there are 6 community radio stations in Vermont, kind of scattered across the state. 4 more are coming on the air in the next 2 to 3 years through a new window of low power radio that just came through. And as such, we're going to join you guys in the State House this year to seek some public funding. It does not take much to go a long way with community radio. So I'm always a spirit of collaborate and connect and make sure folks know that community radio is there. And I just wanted to get on people's radars really briefly, and we'll see you in the State House and hopefully help lift everybody's boats.
That's great. Thank you. I will definitely follow up with you about that, because what the creative sector is really all about is understanding what all of our advocacy work is and making sure we're supporting each other. Because I hear you that we're too small to be asking for separately all the time when we could be working together. So we're right at noon. I do see we have one more question from Mary. In the spirit of noon o'clocking, if you do need to go at noon, we absolutely understand. Mary, if your question's brief, you're welcome to ask it. Otherwise, you can follow up with me over email too.
I'll be brief. Some of the people in this group know me. I appreciate this opportunity, this time that we get to spend together. I want to underscore the need for collaborative effort to support higher education in Vermont for modest income and first generation students. I think the state of Vermont has been derelict in that, and they're not responsive to our inquiries and our efforts to reach out to them to address that. Many promises have been made, none have been delivered upon. And David Mook can speak well to our joint efforts to make that communication. I have also reached out to the Vermont Arts Council and have not heard back. It's not to be bitter. It's truly a plea to say there are some very serious gaps in how Vermont is being attended to, and how our young adults are being attended to and given the opportunities that that everybody should be afforded, and they're not being afforded those opportunities. I would be very happy to share the materials and research that was done over the last 4 years that this group of people put together. And with anyone here, I'll put my email in the chat. Sorry, we don't have more time, but be happy to have more of a conversation with anyone about what we might do to support the state in supporting the arts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. And for putting your email in there too. I think that's one of the strengths of bringing together groups like this too, is also learning from each other and understanding what we're doing to find our connections and communities across the state too. We're a small but mighty state in the creative sector, and there's not too many of us. So opportunities to work together are very, very important. And we so appreciate everyone reaching out about that and sharing what they're working on and coming up with ways for us to stay connected. So thank you all so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate your time, your commitment, your advocacy work, being part of the Vermont Creative Network. It's allowed us to do amazing things, and we'll do so many more moving forward together. Thank you to Christopher and Patty and Deirdre and Catherine and everyone who makes all of this possible. And we look forward to seeing you all in 2025 and doing great things together. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.